Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, an iHeartRadio Best Kids and Family Podcast Award nominee. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Kyo Maclear. She is here to celebrate her beautiful picture book, The Big Bathhouse. Before we invite Kyo into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by The Power of Gratitude, Unlocking Hidden Treasures, written by Ruth Malley. It's a beautiful Reading with Your Kids certified great read. You might ask yourself, why is gratitude so important? Well, Ruth will tell you that gratitude is a beautiful thing to teach our children and to learn from our children. It can transform how we look at life. The Power of Gratitude, Unlocking Hidden Treasures will help your children in so many ways. They will begin to notice the blessings that surround them every single day. They will learn to appreciate what they have and to help those less fortunate, increasing their sense of gratitude. And they will begin to appreciate what others do for them, and so many more. We want to encourage you to check out all three of Ruth's books: The Power of Positivity, The ABCs of a Pandemic, The Power of Kindness Through the Eyes of Children, and of course the latest book in the series, The Power of Gratitude, Unlocking Hidden Treasures. Joining us right now from Toronto in Ontario, Canada. Our guest today is here to celebrate a beautiful picture book. It's called The Big Bathhouse. Please welcome to the show, Kyo Maclear. Kyo, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you on. This looks like a fun book. Tell us all about it, please.
So it's basically a celebration of the women in my family. I grew up going to Japan every summer, and we go to this big bathhouse in Tokyo. And we would just basically strip down and catch up after a year of not seeing each other. And so I really wanted to celebrate the kind of ties between women in my family, and also just celebrate women of all generations kind of enjoying a ritual together, a really simple ritual.
Yeah. So I'm imagining that, and the book is beautifully illustrated, but it illustrates women in a bath. And so there's all sorts of body parts. I'm imagining that some people might be listening thinking, oh my goodness, being in a bath with kids and adults and older aunts and grandmothers, and that doesn't compute to me.
Yeah, it's funny. I think that maybe there'll be a little bit of a translation problem when it comes to a North American market, but I think a lot of people who've grown up in Asian communities will feel this is very familiar to them. Mm-hmm. That just the idea, the kind of frankness about the body, the candor about the body is just very much a part of Asian culture. And I grew up, seeing women at various stages of their lives, saw the kind of women who had babies and women who were breastfeeding. And there's just this kind of openness about nudity in the body and just the celebration of self-care, like taking care of each other, scrubbing each other's backs, washing each other's hair, that felt very loving. And so I really want to celebrate that kind of body positivity. I think that there's so much room in our culture in North America to kind of open a space for that conversation. And I think kids are actually pretty open about it, and that we kind of bring our adult hangups to the conversation. And so I'm hoping this will kind of break through some kind of barriers around talking about how we can have these moments of kind of non-sexual nudity, this openness about the body, and that maybe as a result we'll have less body shame. Mm-hmm. Just seeing bodies of different types and sizes and, ages. Like I think that really teaches, especially young girls who inherit body shame from such a young age, how to feel a little bit more open and accepting and loving of their bodies.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about that whole difference in the way folks in North America, look at nudity and the way folks in Asia look at it, just so we can get a better understanding of the differences.
Well, I don't think it's such a binary. Like, I do think that there are people within North America in diasporic cultures and immigrant communities that have a different relationship to their bodies. But I think that, this is a fairly obvious observation, but like the kind of tendency within mainstream media is to cultivate very sexualized images of the body when they're shown naked, to show very certain types of bodies, like there's a tendency to show only thin bodies, young bodies. And so I think within Asian tradition, there's just this sense of just an openness about things like aging, an openness about things like just body functions. Like there are a lot of books for children in Japan that have come over to North America, like by Taro Gomi, for example, that really just look at like things like pooping and just make it a really open conversation so kids don't feel any embarrassment or shame about it. And I think that's just healthy. And I do think that, I really think that the nudity in this book is incidental. Like I didn't want it to be the main conversation. In fact, the story is really about a relationship between a young girl and her grandmother. And so what I really wanted to capture was how we can communicate across language. So growing up, I didn't speak much Japanese. And so whenever I would go to Japan, it was these rituals like spending time, caring for each other at the bathhouse or sharing meals. Those were the things that bound me to my family members. And so I really want to celebrate that kind of nonverbal communication and just tradition and ceremony. Because I think that we have these little moments in our lives where we really feel connected to people in our families across generations, and they're very special.
I want to talk a little bit more about the cross generation aspect that you were referring to. But before we do, I was sharing with Kyo before, my family and I were very involved in something called a friendship circle with Showa University, which is a women's university in Tokyo. They have a satellite campus here in Boston. And we would go and meet a pair or trio of Japanese students and help them just get to know more about the United States and our culture. And we would learn about Japanese culture and learn a little bit of the language, of each other's language. We had one experience in particular where we were introduced to 3 middle school girls. And after they said to us, "Hi, my name is," we discovered that was all of the English that they spoke. And we spent the day together. And initially, my wife was very concerned, like, how are we going to communicate? We found out really quickly that there was a lot of communication that was going on. And even though we didn't have a lot of words, there was definitely a lot of trust. Those young women put a lot of trust in us. And there was a real kind of connection that was made, even though it was just an afternoon and there wasn't words. There really was a beautiful connection, and it was different than what you'd normally have with someone that you talked about in home and whatnot. Just being, a person being vulnerable and depending on you. And it was when you're speaking about your experience being in Japan and not speaking a lot of Japanese, it reminded me of those girls and what a special memory and day that was.
Yeah, I can relate to that completely. A lot of my relationship with my family in Japan was kind of cut off whenever I'd returned to Canada because I couldn't write letters and we couldn't really talk on the phone. And so it was just the physical presence of being in the same space together that really connected us. And just those little shared rituals of, sharing noodles together, whatever it was, really meant a lot. And so it's funny because in COVID times, we've really been separated and socially distanced. And so there hasn't been a lot of opportunity to be in those kind of ritual spaces together. And so I feel like it's all the more special to have written this book that's kind of looking at this kind of shared communal space. I don't know that we have that many spaces like that anymore that we kind of come to collectively that are kind of non-commercial, where we just enjoy each other's company. But I really wanted to kind of create a book that celebrated that and just the joy of it, the joy of being in intergenerations, because I think we in North America tend to live in nuclear families. and don't necessarily have our grandparents close by, but traditionally in my family in Japan, there were multiple generations, sometimes 4 generations living under one roof. So I really love that idea. And I love the way that aging becomes a little bit less frightening and a little less mysterious when you live with somebody who's actually, 80 years old.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. One of the things that we've talked about here on the podcast is just what you were alluding to, the fact that there isn't a lot that happens intergenerationally here. One of the things that I noticed and loved about Latin cultures, when I married my wife and was introduced to Puerto Rican culture, and then we explored Central America and the Caribbean, is that it was very common to go to a concert or a festival and to see kids and grandparents and aunts and uncles and this wide range. Here it's like, well, the teenagers go to this concert and the old people go to that concert and the kids go and the parents have to get dragged along. We don't see that intergenerational joy together, and I think it's something that's really missing in our culture.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I've had friends who visited from Vienna a few years ago, and they were walking down the main street near where I live, and they were saying, like, are there no old people? Like, this feels very age segregated. And they were saying that, like, in Vienna, there wasn't a street you could walk down without seeing people of all ages, older people, younger people, and that it seemed really zoned, like in Toronto. Like, there were areas where young people were and areas where older families were, and that they didn't seem to mix very much. And I thought about that, and I think even in literature you see that, like in picture books. We talk about diversity a lot, but we don't see a lot of age diversity. We certainly don't see a lot of body diversity on the page. Somebody pointed out recently, I saw on social media, like how infrequently we see larger bodies. You'll have a whole city scene or a whole orchestra, and there won't be a single fat body. And so this kind of tendency to privilege thinness or to privilege youth. Those are all things I think we just kind of inherit as assumptions. But I mean, I love seeing books where there's older generations. I think there are a few picture books that have done that really nicely too. So
yeah, how do you think that a family reading The Big Bathhouse and saying, you know what? I like what's going on here. I like the fact that the young girl is having so much interaction with the grandparents and the aunts and the other people in this big extended family, but we're here by ourselves and the rest of the family's all spread out. How do you think that family might be able to reach out and start having more relationships with the other folks and the other generations in their family?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I mean, maybe there's stories that connect everyone in the family. Maybe it's about sharing memories that, like, or even just asking a grandparent, do you remember what it was like when you were little? And, like, did your family have meals together? And just kind of remembering those moments that were communal. The storytelling in this book is very communal. Like, the girl is the kind of main character, but she kind of disappears into the group. And I really wanted to kind of play down the individual in this story, because I think that part of the joy of kinship and family is that you're celebrating a collective. And so maybe just remembering those moments in your own family when you were all together as a group, whether it was like, a special birthday or a wedding or whatever it was, through pictures, photographs. There's often like photographs in a family album that show a large group of people, and just like asking questions or telling your kids, who those people are, and maybe kind of rekindling some of those stories. I think that's a really nice way to knit a child into a larger collective, and to remind them that their home is much bigger than what they can actually imagine and see.
Yeah, that is definitely something that we did as a family. As you were speaking, I remember that was one of the things that the women from Showa University used to really want to do. They would love, and I would be, I'd be like, oh, they must be bored out of their mind. Look, why are we showing them these pictures of people they don't know? But they would love it, and they would ask questions. And and when my kids were younger, definitely, neither one of my daughter never met my grandmother, who was one of my best buddies. But she can tell you all about her. She knows all sorts of stories, and she can tell you all about Nana. And so I agree. That would be a wonderful family activity to do.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, we
Yeah.
have a stairwell at home which has our kind of wall of ancestors,
Hmm.
and a lot of the people are kind of blood relations, but there are a lot of people that are just kind of family friends that we consider part of our chosen family as well. And just the kids having grown up seeing that wall, I think has given them a real sense that they're surrounded by this community of people, and some of whom are biologically related and some of them who aren't. But it's almost like a visual reminder every day as they walk down the stairs that they pass all these people. And some of them are like very antiquated, the photographs, and people that they never would have met. But it kind of piques their curiosity, I think.
Hmm.
Just seeing somebody in a kimono, or seeing, because my husband's Jewish, seeing somebody like in a kippah or like a tallis or whatever, just having questions about their ancestors.
Yeah. I love that image of walking down the stairs and having all these ancestors look over you and knowing that you are a part of something bigger than yourself. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think it's actually really reassuring for kids to feel that way. I think that sometimes just knowing that their story is kind of nested within a lot of other stories can make them feel really embraced and held.
yeah. Keo, I was taking a look at your website and it's fantastic and you certainly have a great body of work. One of the books that a couple of them that kind of jumped out at me that I wanted just to mention really quick. Being from Boston, of course, Julia, Child really grabbed my attention. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was a really fun book I did with an illustrator named Julie Morstad. And it's really just celebrating the spirit of Julia Child. It's not really like a literal biography, but what I wanted to do was capture her essence and just her love of just food, generally, her joie de vivre.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and also her kind of haphazardness, like her willingness to kind of make a mess, and just celebrate all those things that kind of we often forget as we grow older. I think she really had this way of incarnating this childlike spirit,
Mm-hmm.
and I really wanted to celebrate that. So it's really more of just a tribute to her kind of essence.
Yeah. I have great memories when I was a kid. I had no interest in cooking, but I would often watch her show just because she was so happy and hoo hoo.
Yes, she's hilarious. Yeah.
And just another one that caught my eye because we just went through this huge storm yesterday here in Boston and all throughout the Northeast. Hello, rain. I don't often greet rain. Can you tell us a little bit about Hello, Rain?
Yeah, well, I love rain. I mean, partly because I've become a bit of a gardener, and so, the rain is a friend when you're a gardener. And I worked on that with Chris Turnham, and it was published by Chronicle. And I really wanted to create a very loose story, but it's more of like a prose poem, and it's kind of listing reasons to love the rain. And it's just, I really want to just capture the joy of being outside in the rain when you're a little kid, just splashing in puddles. And she has a companion who's a little dog, and just kind of listing all the various things that, rain does
Hmm.
without being kind of pedagogical about it, like without being too information driven. I just wanted to capture the poetry of rain. Chris Turnham is an incredible illustrator who comes out of animation. So he just did this beautiful job of capturing just rain in all the different ways it comes. And yeah, I wanted it to be like this joyful tribute to rain.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, getting back to the big bathhouse, we talked earlier on just about body positivity. What kind of things, short of building a bathhouse for your family in your backyard, which might not be practical in a lot of places, what kind of things do you think parents can do with their kids to help them develop that just acceptance of themselves and understanding that their body is their own and it's beautiful and it's different than everybody else's, and that's okay?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think that one thing that can help a lot is just finding books too, just like telling stories where there's different characters with different bodies, and just having an open conversation about it, and maybe even questioning representation sometimes. You know, um, there's movies, for example, where kind of fatness is equated with like laziness or like just certain stereotypes, and maybe just kind of asking questions about why that would be, and do you think that's right, and just really starting to like kind of open a conversation. And and maybe also, I think that it's really important not to kind of be overly scrutinizing of your children's appearance, like just not to kind of create a narrative where you're always commenting on their the way they look and stuff, so that they can form their own opinions and they're not kind of always seeing themselves through other people's eyes. But if they start to do so, like if their peers are starting to have conversations about what's beautiful, maybe even opening a conversation about that, there's so many books that kind of open up the kind of world of what beauty is and challenge that. I actually did a book with Julie Morstad as well called Bloom, where we tried to really like kind of poke holes in the idea of what beauty is and traditional beauty is. So even talking about fashion and like, are there fashion designers who are doing things that are a little bit different? And even also gender, for example, like, are there people who are playing with gender and making kind of clothes that are a bit more fluid? And is that beautiful? And just really opening up the conversation, I think, in different ways.
Yeah, that conversation, I think, is so important. And I know one of the things that I used to talk with my daughter about, and she was somebody who everybody would comment about how beautiful she was, and such pretty eyes and such pretty hair. And one of the things that I would always remind her was that it's so much more important to be beautiful on the inside and to treat others with respect and love. And I think that's something that she embraced.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Kyo, I know people are going to want to know where they can go to find that website that I referenced and find out more about all the great books that you've created and find out more about you.
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and I'm at KyoMaclearKids.com. And yeah, I feel free to visit, and I love making picture books, and I hope that you enjoy reading them.
Yeah. We've had a wonderful time speaking to the author of The Big Bathhouse, Kyo Maclear. Hey, Kyo, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Dad.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. It'll be a special Reading with Your Kids rewind. We're looking back at some of our most memorable moments talking about mindfulness and teaching kids to be mindful and reminding ourselves to be mindful and to live purposefully. That's the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. If you are the author of a fantastic children's book, you may be frustrated at just how difficult it is to get your book noticed. I mean, after all, there are literally thousands of books published every single month. It's tough. You don't have to do it alone. We can help. The Reading with Your Kids podcast has helped authors for the last 4 years let the world know about their fantastic children's books. You can go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com, click on the authors Click Here button at the top of the page, and find out how we can help you. You can be a guest here on the podcast. It's fun. It's easy. It doesn't cost you a thing, and it gives you the chance to tell thousands of people about your fantastic book. You can submit your book to our Certified Great Read panel, and if they believe that it's worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a Certified Great Read, and with that status comes a number of really powerful promotional tools. You can also be part of our monthly promotion program that will celebrate your book on the podcast through commercials with blast to our 55,000 plus social media followers, and will display your book on our nationwide network of digital pedestrian billboards. Check it out today. Go to readingwithyourkids.com, click on the authors Click Here button at the top of the page, and scroll on down to the various services that we offer. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. First, I want to start by thanking our guest, Kyo Maclear. Please be sure to check out The Big Bathhouse. Also want to thank our sponsor, The Power of Gratitude, Unlocking Hidden Treasures by Ruth Malley. I want to thank my team, Alejandro Doherty, Fatima Khan, Michael Murphy, Rory Grady. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.